welcome into Texans today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, and on today's show, I'm going to be looking at a little news and rumors roundup. Later on in today's show, I'll give you more around that Texans and Lions joint practice as I get more from some of my sources that were there. But before we do that, I thought I had enough to talk about on today's program before we get going with that. So we have a trade rumor, some injury news, and everything more. But a quick reminder, we will be live on Saturday. Texans, Lions, last preseason game of the year. Maybe I also have Kansas State, Iowa State on the TV as well. Who knows? Who knows? I probably will be going a little dual screen action during that day, the first day of college football. We'll also be obviously breaking down every single play of Texans, Lions, but be there or be square. Got a giveaway. Going to have a lot of fun. Make sure you tune into our live show on Saturday an hour before kickoff. First up on today's show, and my producer, Mr. Jeffrey Cooperstein, probably laugh at me with this one, but Ricky Scoops, I don't really put him on the show a ton. Very controversial man on Twitter, I will say. But he mentioned the Texans, and this is the second time the Texans have been mentioned when it comes to Brian Robinson Jr., so I thought it would be enough for me to talk about on today's show. Because Ricky Scoops, the infamous dog on Twitter that everybody knows, said the Niners, Cowboys, and Texans are all in on Brian Robinson Jr., with the Dolphins being the front runners for the Commanders running back via a trade. And I'll say this before I get attacked in the comment section, but all the big J's out there probably like, Jeremy, are you really talking about a report from Ricky Scoops? I will say, and I'll preface this, Ricky's not an official source or someone that I take as the gospel. He's gotten some scoops right, but I take what he says with a grain of salt. And mostly, I'm talking about it because he mentioned it. Field Yates also hinted at the Texans being interested in Brian Robinson Jr., so that's enough for me to talk about it. I went to our Commanders host, Jack Sperry, and I said, okay, if the Texans were to approach the Commanders, if Nick Caserio was to give the Commanders front office a call, what would the trade look like? And this is the trade that he gave me because, you remember, with the Laramie Tunsil trade, the Commanders sent us their second and fourth round picks in the 2026 NFL draft. So they're kind of light on draft capital. He said this would be enough to get it done. The Texans, all they have to do is send over that fifth round pick, which actually, I actually messed that up. It was a 2026. That's on me. The pick that the Texans basically got from the Philadelphia Eagles, that would be the pick going to the Commanders, and then the Texans, they would receive Brian Robinson Jr. Shout out to producer Coop, one of the best in the biz. Also runs our Mavs channel, by the way. But let me know, would you make this trade? I'll give you my thoughts in just a moment. But if it was just a fifth-round pick for Brian Robinson Jr., give me a yes, give me a no. What would you do if this trade was on the table? No. I would not do that trade if I was the Houston Texans. I don't honestly see how it makes sense for the Houston Texans to make this move and do a trade. I really don't. Because, yes, there's a lot of question marks around the Texans running back room with Joe Mixon's health up in the air. But even past that, Nick Chubb, Dameon Pierce, you also have Ogunbowale, you also have Woody Marks, you drafted in the fourth round out of USC this year. So I don't see the need to go out and trade for a guy in Brian Robinson Jr. I'm sorry. Call me crazy. I don't really think it's a massive need for the Texans right now, the running back position. Nick Chubb's look good. You also have Dameon Pierce. You also have, like I said, mentioned those other two guys in the backfield who, Ogunbowale and Woody Marks, both look really good in that second preseason game up against the Panthers. I know it's preseason, but still, I thought they looked really good. And I will say, don't panic just yet. I've already seen everybody sounding the alarms on Twitter. All the Twitter MD doctors, WebMD guys saying, Mixon might miss the year. Mixon this, Mixon that. I would just say don't panic yet. All right? Because I'll continue to say this. He didn't play all of last training camp. All the way, any of the preseason games, none of it. He wasn't there. He was not practicing until the week leading up to the week one game, and he proceeded to go off up against the Indianapolis Colts. So the Texans, they have a history of being very careful with guys when it comes to injuries. I would say wait until the week, and I know patience is a virtue. I would say wait until the week leading up to that week one game up against the Rams. If we don't see Mixon at practice on that, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday leading up to that first game, week 1 on Sunday, then I'm worried. Then I'm panicking. But until then, I'm going to trust the process and trust the Texans medical staff and the coaching staff that they have this handled. Now, before I get into the other stories on today's show, quick word from our friends over at PrizePicks. Today's episode is brought to you by the #1 daily fantasy sports app in the world, and they go by the name of PrizePicks. Preseason football is underway, and college football, well, it's here, baby. So don't miss out on any of the action this season on PrizePicks. PrizePicks is also the best way to get action on sports in more than 40 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. And for the preseason, it's tough. It's tough. But I have my full season-long projections right here for you. C.J. Stroud, give me the more on his passing yards. Joe Mixon, give me the more on his rush yards. Nico Collins, more on his receiving yards. And you have to have one other team or sport in your lineup. You can't just have all one team. So I'm going to be a hater, and I added Trevor Lawrence the less on his passing touchdowns. And speaking of week 1s, Dak Prescott, max discount. All he has to throw, 1 passing yard in week 1. 1 passing yard for a dub. They're basically handing out free money over there at PrizePicks. So get started today with our friends over at PrizePicks. They also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. So say you have a lineup with 3 different selections. You do a flex play, one of them doesn't work out. You can still win some money on that lineup. Join the millions of users that have already signed up for PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Get started today with PrizePicks. Run your game. All right. I've talked a lot about the Matthew Stafford injury news. That's week 1. Now, we've got a little Tampa Bay Buccaneers injury news. The Texans' week 2 opponent. Adam Schefter gave us an update on Chris Godwin, the receiver, who I don't even know if they need him because Emeka Egbuka reports are that he's looking awesome so far at Bucs training camp. But this is what Schefter had to say on the Bucs plan for Godwin. Plan to activate wide receiver Chris Godwin off the PUP list to have him on their 53-man roster to start the season, but only to begin his ramp-up process for games, not to immediately play in them. Godwin is still unlikely to play until October as he continues recovering from the fractured ankle he suffered in Week 7 versus the Ravens last season. He is expected to start practicing in Week 2. So, obviously, the report says doesn't look like he's going to play until October. So that's well after the Texans play the Buccaneers Week 2 Monday Night Football. But at the same time, says that he's going to start practicing that week. Now, I don't know if that means after week 2 he's going to start practicing or the week of practice leading up to that Texans game, that's when he's going to start practicing. But I will say, if he's out there and he's looking good, there's a slim possible chance that he could suit up that Monday night. Obviously, I know it's only 1 day, but you get an extra day of rest, an extra day to see with the Texans and Bucs playing on that Monday Night Football game. So, could he play up against the Texans? I would say very unlikely, but very interesting to see that the Bucs are willing to take up a couple of their roster spots with Chris Godwin. Not only him, but also all-pro left tackle Tristan Wirfs, because it looks like they're doing the same thing with him. Adam Schefter, once again, said Bucs head coach Todd Bowles told reporters that left tackle Tristan Wirfs also will start the season on the 53-man roster. And he is similar to the return to play timeline as wide receiver Chris Godwin. And you're probably wondering, Jeremy, what does this all mean for somebody who isn't, up to date with how 53-man rosters work, what the PUP list is, everything like that. Basically, the Bucs are trying to maneuver their roster so that if Tristan Wirfs and Chris Godwin are ready to go earlier than suspected, they could go ahead and play, because if they started off on the PUP list, if they started off on short-term IR, they would have to miss a minimum of 4 games. Looks like they don't want to take that chance, and they want to say, hey, we're going to keep them on the 53-man roster, then we're going to put them back on the injured list, and that way, if they want to return at any point in those first 4 weeks, they can. Now, this does mean the Bucs will have to cut multiple other players and then probably sign somebody off of waivers, sign another free agent, do something, maybe pull somebody up for the practice squad, once they basically put Chris Godwin and Tristan Wirfs back on the injured list, looks like that's a chance they're willing to take. So very interesting strategy. Bold move, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, though, for injury updates, news, trade rumors, and more live watch parties all year long. Not just around the Texans. I want y'all to be the most notified. I want y'all to be the most in tune and informed fans that y'all can possibly be. And that doesn't mean just the Texans. That means who the Texans play as well. Week 1 up against the Rams. I'm going to be giving you Matthew Stafford updates. Week 2 against the Bucs. Chris Godwin and Tristan Wirfs. I'm going to let you know who the Texans are playing and who is going to be suiting up for those teams each and every single week. Another reason why you got to hit that subscribe button. All right. Last up, and maybe the least fun talking point on today's show, another Jimmie Ward update. And I might have put my foot in my mouth a couple times talking about Jimmie Ward, and I try to play the middle. I try not to say too much on either side, especially whenever it comes to court proceedings and legal issues of this nature. But there was another update, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about it, because Pro Football Talk put out an article today talking about the allegations against Jimmie Ward. This is straight from Pro Football Talk. The plaintiff is the mother of Ward's 3-year-old child. She alleges that he showed up at her house at a time when she suspected he was under the influence of methamphetamines, specifically crystal meth. He allegedly slapped and choked the plaintiff while their son was sleeping. He allegedly threatened to kill her, and he allegedly forced her to perform a sex act. So, obviously, very, very touchy subjects going on with the legal battle with Jimmie Ward. I will note, and it is a very important note, it was filed in Montgomery County, dismissed, then picked up once again in Harris County, basically refiled, and then now there's going to be a court proceeding with Jimmie Ward and the alleged victim in this case. So I will say the only thing I'm going to put out there is the future is still majorly in question for Jimmie Ward with this team, because I know how D'Amico feels about him. He's the first guy he brought over whenever he got hired by the Houston Texans to be the head coach. But with the injury, with all the legal battles looming, it's just it's a tough position to be in, especially once you're trying to make roster cut-down day, whenever you're trying to cut your team down to 53. I know he won't technically count against the 53 because, of his injury, but to have that looming around the Texans, I mean, we've had a checkered past with this franchise of having people with legal battles and, being around the team. I don't know what'll happen, but I will say every step of the way, I'm going to keep you updated. Make sure to give me a follow on Twitter at Jeremy Chuggs. No matter what happens, either way with the Jimmie Ward situation, I will be able to tell y'all exactly what's going on down and how it affects the Houston Texans. That's all I have for you on today's show, folks. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Join us on Saturday for our preseason Week 3 watch party up against the Detroit Lions.